Welcome, everybody, to GZ Truth News. It is January 8th, 2024. We have Dr. David Schein, author and lawyer and professor, author of A Bad Deal for America. Thank you very much for coming on. Let's see, I'd like to read the excerpt of your new book, relatively new book that you made, Bad Deal for America. Bad Deal for America explores the high-stakes game U.S. politicians are playing with the taxpayers' money. The major players themselves, like a deck of cards, have shown us in their own words that the political system is broken. Readers can follow the money to see how some have lived high on the hog while masquerading as public servants. Told in an entertaining and unique way, this book is a call to arms to fulfill the ideals of the founding fathers by holding the political class responsible. So, thank you for coming on and tell us all about it.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for giving me a chance to talk about the book. The book was released on President's Day 2022, so it's been out for a little while. And we just finished working on an audiobook, and we did something a little different. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Bad Deal for America. Kind of came to me. You know, I'm driving around and I think all the time, and I design books and think about different articles and things, and it occurred to me, I said, it's like a big a game, lottery game in Washington. These guys are playing a high stakes card game with our money. And I said, how would you put that together? So I thought, yeah, how about a deck of cards? And then Bad Deal for America, the title came to me. And since I'm not a gambler, I actually had to go out and buy a deck of cards so I can look at the deck of cards and say, oh, this is how this works. And what we did is we assembled, and to be fair, it's not an honor to be listed in this book. We're looking for things that were funny, stupid, absurd, that were said by these highly paid so-called public servants who are largely serving themselves in Washington. And so the idea is the popular parlance today is we call them red states and blue states, or, the red color is the Republicans and the blue states, the Democrats. Personally, Dr. Schein, I would switch those two. But in any event, that's what the media has done. So a normal deck of cards is red and black. But what we did is we kept the red color the same, and they were the two suites that we used for the Republican quotes. And then the black suite we changed to blue. So the book is actually printed in color of red and blue to honor the current parlance of Republicans and Democrats. And so what we did is for each suite card, in other words, an ace, a two, a three, a four, we had a specific Republican or Democrat politician. And it's structured because, like, the face cards have higher profile people like Chuck Schumer and McConnell and those people, Nancy Pelosi. They got the face cards because they are much higher profile people. And of course, in a deck of cards, the face cards are the high level cards. So there was a little strategy there. Not everybody in the book is a current member of Congress, but the requirement was they had to be a member of Congress at some point. So we did have one joker card, and that is Joe Biden. That was the only kind of partisan lean in the book. Other than that, the book is actually bipartisan because you've got Republicans who have said stupid things and absurd things, and you've got Democrats who've said stupid and absurd things. So the first thing that I came up with, I wanted to show people how much money the people in Washington actually have available. And I have some firsthand knowledge about this because in my life, I had been single for a big period of time. And I was dating a wonderful young woman in the 90s into the year 2000. And she was a staffer for Congressman Archer, who you may recall became chairman of Ways and Means. He was from Texas, from the Houston area. and he became chairman of Ways and Means in January of 1995 in the big Republican sweep in 1994 under the Clinton administration. And so I actually was in Washington for his swearing in, but then was still here in Houston. She was working in his Houston office. But then we wanted to move to Washington, the two of us. And so she got a job in Archer's Washington office in 1999. And so for the couple years there, before Archer retired in the year 2000, I got a chance to really see Washington very close up. And Mr. Archer did not use all of the tickets and invites that he got from lobbyists. So I actually got to go to like parties and go to clubs where they reserve tables at clubs. I got to see Jerry Jeff Walker up close, front row table paid for by lobbyists. And of course, he's there shaking everybody's hand and all that. And of course, there's never any policy discussion at these things, but the message is clear. Hey, we've got firsthand, off the beat contact with these very high level people. Of course, we showed up instead of Congressman Archer, but it was still a very interesting time period where I got a chance to really see, there's a famous cliche to be, you say, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I actually was the fly on the wall because I had no official position at all. I wasn't even a staffer. I was just a friend of a staffer, but I got a chance to see how things work. So in any event, I did my first book, Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures, that tracks the decline of the presidency and the people in the presidency. And I wanted to come back and do Congress. And so I looked up, in addition to looking up all these stupid direct quotes by these different politicians, I also wanted to show people how much money they actually have available. One of the most common stories that the members of Congress will tell you, and in fact, somebody mentioned this to me the other day, I think on purpose because they know my book, and they said, oh, Congressman XYZ was saying how broke he is, and he's got this expensive house in Washington, and he's got to maintain his house in his district and all that. And it's all ridiculous. It's all nonsense. Let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, average American income in the United States is 65,000. And I know that's an average. It means half the, good piece of the population is making a whole lot less than that. And the poverty level in this country is like 40 or 50,000 a year. I mean, it's pretty high. But in any event, these cats make a guaranteed salary of between 175 and 185,000 a year. And if you're Speaker of the House or something like that, you get an extra 20,000 or something. But that's the starting point. They then get all sorts of allowances. And it took me, with two very good research assistants as a professor, I have access to college students who need money, and I need research so I get my books out faster. And so we spent almost 8 months trying to figure out exactly how much money these cats had to spend. And it's closer to $1 million a year. Their salaries included, but they have all sorts of expense accounts. They get to mail things for free. They get free gym membership in Washington. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And we detail that in the book. Then at the end of the book, I came back. I say I because, again, the middle of the book features the actual politicians. And I come back and talk about some of the multimillionaires that we have in Washington. One of them, of course, is John Kerry, who's not technically an officer anymore, but he was. And we talked about Chuck Grassley, who's a multimillionaire. And it's very interesting to see these folks, some of whom have been in Washington a long time. And Joe Biden, of course, a lot of Joe Biden's wealth is now coming out as a result of these congressional investigations. But the meat of the book, after figuring out how much money these people actually have available, was to edit the quotations that I collected. So there was a give and take there. So we'd have a politician, and he might have 3, 4 short quotes, and we'd find another politician who had 6, and we'd say, okay, well, this guy lost his card. He got bumped, and we'll put the guy in on that card who's got the 6 quotes. But we created a slush fund at the end of the book called chips, as in poker chips. And we put in people who didn't have enough quotes to get their own card, playing card. But we had some fun with it. I can tell you that I'll mention one politician in particular, he's now deceased, was Bob Dorman from California. Dorman, we found quotes from Dorman that were so offensive that I did not put them in the book because I was afraid it would get the book banned. Now, maybe I should have done that because it would have given me a big boost of publicity for the book. But I mean, again, I'm not going to say it during our interview, but he said some things that were stunningly insensitive and inappropriate for, for anybody who's in the public eye, not just an elected politician. My personal opinion is that these people are far, far too disconnected. And one of the ways that I show this is for each card, we list the person, the positions that they've held. Like if they were in the Congress and the Senate, it says the years that they were in the Congress and the years that they were in the Senate. And then we total it. We'll say, like for Joe Biden, it's like 48 years in Washington. I mean, it's huge. And it's a justifiable criticism when people ask, well, why is Joe Biden a millionaire? He's worked for the government his whole life. Where did all this money come from? So I think there's some legitimate inquiries that are happening right now. But in any event, somebody has asked us why Trump is not as in the book, and it's a very quick answer. You had to be a member of Congress, either the House or the Senate, at least a term or two, in order to be in the book. Most of the people in the book were long-term politicians. We do have just about every member of what I call the squalids, Ilhan Omar and AOC and those cats. I call them not the squad, I call them the squalids. And they're all in there because they started off by saying stupid things right away. So they were pretty easy pickings. But it was interesting to put it together. This criteria for the quotes was they had to stand on their own. In other words, I didn't want to be explaining the quote to you, the reader. I wanted you to read the quote and say, man, what an idiot that we're paying public money to represent us. I didn't want to have to say, well, when he said this, he was being asked this question and all that. So there was a specific effort to have short quotes and to also have quotes that didn't require explanation other than maybe a couple words that would make it nonsensical if you didn't put a couple words in brackets. The other thing that we did is every single quote gives its source. And that's a no-cut deal for me as an academic. And of course, think about what just happened at Harvard with Claudine Gay is even though I use researchers, I am a real hardcore person. I make my researchers give me the full citation, and if possible, to save me time, the actual piece that they're citing. I go back and review all of the material that has been submitted to me personally. Dave Schein does it, go through and make sure that these quotes are fair and they came from a source. And what we tell people is, hey, if you think you've been misquoted, then you need to go back to the source that we used. We use this source. That's who we're relying on. So, but I can tell you in the 2 years the book's been out, we've been a bestseller on Amazon when we were released, that we have not had anybody come back and say you were unfair to me or anything like that. So the book has gotten a very good response from critics and from readers. And so that, I think we did a pretty careful job. But my deal is, again, having spent some time close up in Washington, and with the modern technology that we have, we're doing a Zoom call today. As I mentioned to you, this is my 3rd Zoom call of today alone, is that we could run Washington better from home districts. and make sure people are connected. And for some reason, there's been a lot of publicity about George Washington lately. And I'm a huge fan of Ben Franklin and Tom Jefferson. Not as much of a fan when I was younger of George Washington. The more and more that I learn about George Washington, he's right on that top list with Ben Franklin and Tom Jefferson, as far as I'm concerned. But think about the fact that he lives in suburban Washington, in Mount Vernon's beautiful property. You know, it was his dear property. He loved being there, loved being home at his own property. And they were ready to make him King George of America. And he said, this is not how we're going to do things here. This is not how we're going to do things. And he went home. And the tradition of going home was there until Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat and a failure, in my opinion, as president, ran out 4 terms. And he can say, oh, well, we're in World War II and all that. But we weren't in World War II in 1932 or 1936 or 1940. So 3 times that he ran for president, we were not in World War II. He ran for president once when we were in World War II. About the only time you could say, oh, let me rationalize not switching gears. But in any event, Washington, in my opinion, set a standard that should still be done today. And what we've created is Washington is now running independent of America. It's its own world. And the major defense contractors and the lobbyists for both the contractors and every other interest in the world are all parked up there on the Beltway. And I did spend a number of years up there after my friend got off, when Archer retired and all that. And it's a fascinating control of power in a very narrow area. And I think the only way that we're going to break that control and bring the control of America back out to the people is to install term limits. I do not think even the best of them, and many of them, especially Republicans, I'm not promoting Republicans, but a number of Republicans have run saying, I am going to go home. I'm only going to run for a certain number of districts. And it's interesting because most of the people who have voluntarily left Washington are members of the Republican Party or are conservative Democrats, middle of the road Democrats. It's very interesting who goes home and who, keeps running again. But again, you've got plenty of Republicans who have stayed up there well past their expiration date, on your groceries, the expiration date. But my feeling is that we do need to have a significant change. Let me start with the presidency. The president presently is limited to 2 4-year terms. The problem is, and we've seen this especially over the last 20, 30 years, and obviously I've been paying attention for a while, is they are running for office starting about halfway through not their 4th year, their 3rd year. I mean, Joe Biden's been running for president since the beginning of his 3rd year of his presidency. He's almost been in perpetual campaign mode. He ain't running the country. He's out running for office for himself. And if he was to be elected, and half the presidents lately have had a 2nd term, is they then spend their 2nd term trying to make sure their legacy is protected. And we especially saw this with Barack Obama. Barack Obama hated Hillary Clinton, but he regarded her as a successor to him to a certain extent, and he supported her over Joe Biden, as everybody knows. But it wasn't because he liked Hillary Clinton. It was because he wanted to show that his influence extended past his 8 years. But how they do that is they spend their 2nd 4-year term picking out the location of their presidential library. Does anybody really care? Do we care? I mean, couldn't he do that after he's off the payroll? And so, I mean, I'm just saying that we're not getting anything near 8 years out of these clowns. So my deal is I would have 1 5-year term for president, period. That's it. And if you come in as vice president, maybe we have another election after so many years and you don't get to run again. You've already been president. We'll let you have 4 years and we'll schedule it so that we can do this on, on a more random basis. I would say the Senate, probably 2 5-year terms. I don't think 6 years ever made any sense. And then for Congress, I would say I would stay with the 2-year terms. I would say a maximum of 4 or 5 terms. Bang, you go home. You can run for Senate, or you can go home and live under the laws that you've created. In terms of living in Washington, I can tell you as someone who lived in Washington, I lived in Alexandria, Virginia. It is a very expensive place to live. Housing, of course, is famously high, but even things like gasoline, if you're up close to DC, if you're near the Washington Beltway, you pay about 50 cents a gallon more than people just a few stops down the road in Virginia pay. There's like a headache effect or hangover effect in Northern Virginia. You get past a certain point, it's like, hey, welcome to the rest of America. Gasoline here is $3 a gallon, but it's $3.65 if you get past that certain point and you're near the main commuting stops in Northern Virginia. So it is very expensive to be in DC, but part of the reason is because of this massive concentration of these overpaid members of Congress in the House and all of these wealthy lobbyists and defense contractors that are camped out up there. So it is a really interesting syndrome that's happening. So I think we could do a much more efficient government, and we could make it be more responsive to the people. And I hope that something will happen. I'm supporting Convention of the States. I'm not a member of Convention of the States. I'm concerned because, and some other people expressed a concern that could turn into a very wild scene, but the people that are involved in that have promised me that they can have a meeting based strictly on term limits, and that's the only thing that they would bring forward, at least at this point. But I'm not exactly sure how that would work. Unfortunately, I do not think that the current crop of politicians will voluntarily come home to their districts and will voluntarily have term limits.
Well, yeah, surprisingly, you would think we would already have term limits, but
yes, well, we do for president. But like I said, it's still not it doesn't really help the American people because of the way the members of the presidency manipulate their 4 to 8 years in office. And, again, most of the presidents have had 8 years. And, the exceptions have been, of course, Richard Nixon resigned, but had already been elected to a second term. Gerald Ford arguably might have been elected, but people still had some hangover from Richard Nixon. Carter, a lot of people are joking about Carter, saying Carter in his I don't want to say anything bad about Carter. He's in hospice care, and of course, Rosalynn Carter has just recently passed away. But the running joke is that Carter is no longer the worst president since World War II, with Joe Biden in there. But so that's kind of interesting, from that standpoint. But there is no assurance as we sit here today that Joe Biden will or will not be reelected. The consensus seems to be that because of his infirmity, which is quite visible, that he will not actually be the candidate. And I have heard some wild stories about how that would happen. But, let's see what happens. That's one thing, is we only have to wait, 11 months. So it's coming up.
it's pretty amazing what they're doing over there. So what do you think, obviously I think that's a great idea. I'm sure a lot of people do too with the term limits for Congress and everybody. What are the chances of this happening? Obviously, like you said, they don't want to vote for this themselves. They keep voting themselves raises and other things
Yeah,
like that. They'd rather vote themselves raises than vote themselves term limits. So what are the
I
odds of this happening?
I'm not sure. I think one possibility might be that the depending on who gets into the White House this time, that if there's a popular movement toward it, like, let's replace these Palestinian demonstrations with term limit demonstrations around the country, that there might be more visibility to it, particularly if a conservative person is elected president, that could be a very powerful message, say, in the 2-year election. In other words, in 2026, there'll be another federal election cycle. That could become a very popular issue depending on who's in the White House and how much national attention is paid to it. And we're discussing right now putting another push on the book Bad Deal for America to try and encourage people to think about the issue. You don't have to buy my book, they just have to think about this issue. I also think one of the things that could be very disruptive to this is, I'm sure you've heard of the No Labels Party. I'm not happy with the No Labels Party. I think it's kind of a Democrat light party, is because I've done my research on it. And I would like to see a party that was more pro-America down the middle and not a light left party versus a far left party or far right party. I think a lot of Americans would like to see something. Personal projection, I think the Democrats and Republicans are finished as parties. I think the starting point toward term limits may be that you're going to start having people across the country elected to other political parties, and you're going to have a multi-party system more similar to Europe, and many other developed countries have what we call consensus governments. And I think that the two-party system is part of what will bring this system down, is when you start having people elected from third parties and fourth parties.
Yeah, that'll definitely be interesting. What any last words or predictions?
I don't think we've settled the election issue yet. I think I don't know that Iowa and New Hampshire are going to be the last word. I am a conservative. I'm not a Trumpite. I think that at the moment, Trump does look like the likely candidate. I am unhappy with some of the things that he's done, specifically he's been openly critical of Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. I don't think that serves America. They're both good people. They make. I would rather have him say good things and say, but I'm better and I've already proven that I can accomplish things, than to spend time putting them down. And on the Democrat side, people keep talking about alternative candidates, but I don't think, as a practical matter, that they can run somebody other than Kamala. I think that Kamala is the vice president. She is a woman. She's a woman of color. And I do expect that if for some reason Joe Biden doesn't run, it would be extremely hard to push her aside to put another candidate in there. One of the whack stories I heard the other day was a Michelle Obama Newsom ticket. I don't know what whack lefties think that would be a good idea, but I think you could have a Kamala Harris Newsom ticket, but I don't think a Michelle Obama ticket would have any legs at all. I don't think it could get there. You know what I'm saying? On the Republican side, I do expect a woman to be the vice presidential candidate. And perhaps if he won't take Nikki Haley, who I would take, maybe he'll take Marsha Blackburn. who has been remarkably calm in the midst of everything. So a little secret there in terms of the Dave Schein crystal ball.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Schein. Thank you for your insights and everything. We hope to hear from you soon again. Thank you.
Happy to do it. And thank you so much for the invite, and enjoy your time up there in Seattle, and just hopefully you don't have a retail store.
That's right. And you as well in Houston. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.